My name is Ann Grycz, and I have with me Monsignor Michael Mitchell, who is one of the founding fathers of the Diocese of San Jose. And I am delighted that we are doing this project to get a record of the early days of our diocese. So, Monsignor Mitchell, January 27th, 1981
Correct.
was when the diocese was established. You were working in the archdiocese at the time.
Yes, I was. I was the assistant superintendent of schools for finance, and I was working one level down from Bishop Demain at the time. Bishop Demain at that time was the secretary for education for the archdiocese, and that, as a matter of fact, the night before the official announcement, I dropped by his office and I said, "How's things going?" And he said, "Tomorrow morning I'm going to be appointed the Bishop of San Jose." And I said, "If you need any help, I'll go along with you," especially because my hometown was Los Gatos.
In the new diocese.
In the very new diocese. And so he said, "Well, we'll see about that." And the next morning, when it was made official, then Monsignor Daniel F. Walsh, who was the chancellor of the archdiocese, called me on the interoffice phone and started singing, "Do You Know the Way to San Jose?" So I got my clear picture that I was going to San Jose.
A question, you
Sure.
mentioned the official announcement was at the end of January. Were there all kinds of rumors? Did you know that something big was happening?
No, not that immediately. There had been a visit by the apostolic delegate, Archbishop Jadot, about 9 or 12 months before. In fact, your Uncle Jack was involved in the meeting. So there had been exploration about it, and there had been, the sense that it was time to make a new diocese, and so it was not unexpected. The exact timing was not known.
It wasn't. It made sense for a new diocese to be established. Why? What?
Well, first of all, it's a matter of size and also a matter of span of control. At that time, the archdiocese had 150 parishes, and stretching from Gilroy to I think
Novato.
Bolinas, out on the coast, and so it's a very large geographical area, and also the county of Santa Clara was growing in population, and there was a need to begin to recognize that. So that's all I know about how it came about, how the decision was made to make a new diocese. I can tell you a lot more about how to go about making a new diocese after it's been announced.
What about that time from January 27th until March 18th, when we were not dedicated, but we were officially
installation.
Installation.
There was a couple of decisions made almost immediately. And the first of these was it was right in the middle of the annual diocesan appeal, which is annual archdiocesan appeal at the time. And so they need to figure out what's going to happen next, because there's probably no convenient time to split a diocese. So it was determined that first of all, that somebody ought to be the representative of the new diocese. And Archbishop Quinn and Bishop Demain appointed me as the representative. And so I was the first person on the payroll, more or less. And then a second determination was made that the archdiocese would finance the expenses of the new diocese until June 30th, the end of the fiscal year, and then we'd be billed back for whatever we expended. Because we had to go about setting up the whole apparatus. And one of the first tasks that I did was to try and find out how other dioceses than the Archdiocese of San Francisco worked. And two of them, especially the Diocese of Oakland and the Diocese of Stockton, because they had started afresh,
Right.
Now the people who were there, happily, there were still people there who had been part of the beginning. Monsignor Irwin Kane in Stockton and Monsignor John Conley in Oakland. So I visited both of those places to find how it went and what they were doing and how they were doing their business, and also for further interest, I went to the Diocese of Monterey to see how they do
our neighbors to the south.
South, yeah. So that kind of gave me, some hints.
Mm-hmm.
And there were some, again, in the order of things. The Archbishop had decided and made a determination that there would be a lay pension program that would cover all lay employees, and so that needed to be taken care of while we were splitting the diocese. So one of the things I was cautioned on is to make sure, because it was going to be a defined benefit plan, that you have adequate payroll records. Okay. And so we said we would, but we decided that there would be a unified payroll for the whole diocese. Uh-huh. This was welcomed very much by the secretaries and bookkeepers
in the parishes
as a matter of fact, I had them as allies, because not all liked the idea, especially some of the older pastors. But the secretaries were with me, because I told them, I said, you're going to do one last 941 report, and they'll never have to do one again. And they generally said, how do I sign up for this?
You're my favorite person, Monsignor Mitchell.
Yes. Right? And I wasn't a Monsignor yet. I was simply Father Mitchell. Right. Okay. So so that had to be done. Then we all had to get banking arrangements, and then we had to form the civil corporations to deal with the properties. Then try and solicit the records for it was
a busy time.
Yeah, well, and it stayed busy. It was busy, hectic, and interesting. But you had the experience that you were doing something you'd never done before, and probably never do again. Right. But it was, and trying to get it right, and setting up the payroll, getting an accounting system straightened out, and then begin to recruit people to staff the offices.
Now, speaking of the offices, how was the decision made because our first offices were at St. Joseph's Seminary, right?
Right. Well, at the time, the archdiocese was subsidizing the college that was in the building, mm-hmm. To the tune of $500,000 a year, mm-hmm. And because of the amount of cash, well, step back a little bit. Three numbers that would be very helpful for people who are there here now that weren't there then. The annual diocesan appeal amount for Santa Clara County for the 1981 archdiocesan appeal mm-hmm. was $1,920,000.
In 1981.
In 1981. The budget when we first started, when we finally, because for all this time we had to start budgeting for whatever was going to come next, was $1,600,000. And then at the same time, the parishes in Santa Clara County had construction underway that was $2.2 million. And so all of this, there was a little cash flow problem at the outset, to say the least. So the reason we needed to go to the college is because as we had already had putting $500,000 into the building, we had plenty of room for offices mm-hmm. For the unoccupied space, and it was a a deliberate decision, because it was Bishop Demain's desire to be in the See City, but the economics weren't there. And the other, it was also a problem because it was a little remote from the rest of the diocese. So but the object was somewhere down the road. We're going to downtown San Jose. In that period, we were monitoring construction. The bishop had thought, by way of that he would be better served if he lived at St. Patrick's Church, which was the first cathedral. Right. And but it turned out that it did not allow enough privacy, and so against his desires, we had to buy a house, which basically to facilitate entertainment if where necessary, and also to, so if he could have a meeting privately with people that oh, did you see who was coming?
Exactly, exactly.
So that was underway. I didn't have much to do with the personnel switch, but uniquely, the two bishops agreed that each priest could go to the diocese that he wanted to go to. And that was a real novelty. Yeah. And in the end, I think that we lost net one. But what happened was that the presbyterate of San Jose was on average much younger. Uh-huh. So it turned out very satisfactorily. Everybody. You got what you wanted. And if you don't like what you wanted, well, it's regrettable, but there you are. You wanted it. So that worked out very well. Then there was the whole business of dividing the assets equitably.
That must have been interesting.
Well, it certainly was. And the first thing is, well, let's do this the first idea was the then Monsignor Walsh decided, well, we just base it on population and that'll be it. And my very good friend, Bruce Agnew, who is the chief financial officer of the archdiocese, says, this is not going to work economically. We need to, and for those who don't know much about diocesan economic operations, one of the big engines in any diocese is what's called the Deposit and Loan Fund. And that's a case where parishes put their surplus cash in a fund and earn interest on their deposit, and the diocese serves as the banker and lends at interest to parishes that are in need of funds. So the situation was San Francisco had all the deposits and we had all the loans. And so it wasn't going to work out that way. And then most of the vacant land that was still reserved for parishes was in Santa Clara County, and there was only one vacant property in Marin County. So then further to that was they had the endowments, various endowments of the archdiocese that had to be structured together with. So we were managing property against stocks, against cash, and so it turned out it turned out again a very equitable thing. But it was Mr. Agnew who's just saying, that's not going to work, Father, to Monsignor. And so away we went. There were, clearly some imbalances, but then they needed to be addressed. And so one of the things that Bishop Demain held out at the outset was that our tribunal was busier than the one in San Francisco because of the number of canon law cases that were active in Santa Clara County as against the other three counties. So it was there was a lot of well, what about this and what about that, and then there was we were very fortunate in finding a dream hire, a gentleman named Frank Greiner. Mr. Greiner had been previously, he was the retired city clerk at San Jose.
Oh.
And he built our filing system, from the ground up. And this is the way we're going to do it. And this is how we're going to, and there won't be more than one copy of any letter. And so basically carrying out so we were very fortunate in having his expertise. We had great expertise. A gentleman I knew from Sarah High School and the Department of Education, Malcolm Viswal, who was the accountant for the college and became our accountant. It was a manifest help in structuring our new accounting systems and methodologies. So we were very fortunate in those things. We had it was assumed that we would go with Bank of America when we split. Mm-hmm. And there was a gentleman named Paul Watson who was then the vice president for Wells Fargo.
Oh dear.
Who had gnashed his teeth every time he signed his ADA check and knew it was being processed by Bank of America. And he and his subsidiary folks in San Jose were going to get that account. So we're having a meeting, Bishop and I are having a meeting, interviewing bankers. And of course the folks from B of A were a little, what's this? We have to be interviewed? Yes, you have to be interviewed. And so here's what we need. We need lockbox activity. We need this, because we were also doing the accounting for Midi High School. Uh-huh. So all of that was going on, and the Bank of America is going, I don't think we can do that. No, fella, we can't handle that. We can't do that. And the Wells Fargo guys come in, and I'm saying, this is what we need. We can do that. We can do that. We can do that. And laterally, I found out that after they got outside the door, they go, how are we going to do that? But so it was very interesting there.
Did we go with Wells Fargo?
Yes, we did.
And they did it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They
found a way.
They delivered. Boy, the stagecoach came through for us. Okay.
I had a question about, and you mentioned that you weren't in personnel, but the fathers who came from San Francisco, were they just plugged into whatever parish needed from priesthood?
Well, there were. Yes, well, because there was some rotation, because pastors retired. Sure. Several pastors left the diocese, left San Jose to go to San Francisco, and so there was Monsignor Jim Walsh, who had been the parochial vicar at St. Simon's, became pastor at St. Cyprian's. So there was a lot of movement within the county as well as between.
Yeah. Because that was a time of real growth, wasn't it? In
Santa
Clara County. Silicon Valley was just starting.
Yeah, it was still getting the Valley of Heart's Delight was beginning to change.
Yeah. Of course, you grew up in the Valley of Heart's
Delight.
Yeah,
right. So there we go. A prune picker or two. To go back a little bit about the payroll thing. Mm-hmm. Some of the older pastors were not pleased at all, and one of the vociferous, he resented it, and he said, so I was working with ADP to see how we could we get his signature on his checks. And they, no, it can't be done. Well, it couldn't be done at that time. Mm-hmm. It probably could be now, but it wasn't. So I went in to explain to Bishop Demain that we were in a impasse. And he said, well, what's Father's argument? And he told me, Bishop, that he said one's loyalty goes to him who signs the paycheck. And the bishop said, put my name on that check and nobody else's. And so it went.
So it went.
And even to this day, you'll find the Bishop McGraw's on everybody's check. So that was one of the little bumps in the road that not all were pleased. And then then by the time we get to June, and we're in the midst of trying to take the parcels for all the properties to get them moved from the corporations in San Francisco to the right corporations in San Jose. It's the middle of the medfly fruit
I
thing.
remember the medfly. Yes,
And yours truly, a National Guardsman, got activated.
Right in the middle.
Just to add to kind of the maraschino cherry on the sundae of difficulty, you know. So that was and we were involved in that because if you recall, I don't know if you do recall, the city of San Jose would not let the National Guard's contractor use the airport, and they persuaded the federal government not to let Moffett Field be used as with the refueling point. So Gate of Heaven Cemetery, because it was on an isolated single road, had a National Guard patrol up there, armed, by the way, blocking it, and that's where the helicopters were refueled and retanked for the spraying.
So it was fairly new at that point, I think.
Which,
Gate of Heaven.
No, Gate of Heaven was 10 years old at that time.
Okay, well that's fairly new. Yeah.
Well, yeah, time flies. So then I guess well, let's see. So that really got us. Most of what I've said so far is mostly what went on from January to June. Then June we have implementation, and and then so the next little implementation is. Oh, by the way, let me go back. We had to reinsure all the properties, and we had to get notice from San Francisco. What liabilities do you know of that we can cover and insure? So, and
be a great person to consult anybody who is setting up a diocese.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a once in a lifetime experience.
Yes, I can imagine. It's unique.
You wouldn't want to do it twice. So we got all that in place, and we had again a great assist from a gentleman named Frank Heffernan, who is a staunch friend in many ways, because we also had to run a health plan, and among other things, for all those employees. And we're talking about the employees not only for the diocesan office, the cemeteries, the high school, Archbishop Minnie High School, but all the schools and parish offices. So it got to be a
fair number of people.
So we were all that went a little bit easier. The health thing went a lot easier than anything else, as a matter of fact. Because everybody was in the process. All we did was change a group number, and we were off to the races.
Good. So one part was easy anyway.
Yeah. Well, we had we made a little change there. We put the priest and the religious and the lay employees all in the same pool. San Francisco had them divided in separate pools. But it turned out actuarially better for us to have everybody in the big pool together.
How was it decided that St. Patrick's would be our Proto Cathedral? Do you remember?
I wasn't in on that one. Well, St. Joseph's was not. It was in huge disrepair, right. And so while everyone believed that it would ought to be but it just wasn't going to do it, and it was. I think the St. Patrick's was one of the newer remodeled churches. It wasn't the biggest. I mean, Trinity at that time would have been bigger, and Francis Cabrini would have been bigger. But again, wanted to be downtown. So and then, but there was a lot of heartburn about St. Joseph's not being the cathedral. So Bishop DeMaine figured, well, okay, let's see what we can do to kind of, put a little oil on the troubled waters. So he writes to Rome to get it made a basilica. And the thing comes back from Rome with, because all the pictures were saying, you can't make this a basilica. It doesn't conform to modern liturgical norms. Now you could go through most of the city of Rome and find basilicas that don't conform, but
that's different.
so then we, and the other thing that was going on at the time is, where would be the eventual office? Mm-hmm. Okay, and St. Patrick's is a parish, but I mean they didn't have huge meeting facilities and everything. So then when it came that we were going to have to remodel St. Joseph's to make it
up to snuff.
Up to snuff, then that's when maybe it's going to be the cathedral. So that's how it came to be the Cathedral Basilica of St. Joseph's. Now, in 1985, when I was leaving the office, we had just let the contract to start dealing with the remodeling, and it was $6 million at the time. Mm-hmm. But we found out a lot of things about that building that we didn't know ever before. That too kind of grew. It was we also had a misfortune that Mr. Swenson, his business went into very great difficulty and couldn't come forward on the deal. So we had a little bump in the road in the start on that one. One of the more memorable things was getting ready for the second now annual diocesan appeal, ADA. Right. Yeah, the AAA went away, and now ADA. So the great pastor of St. Christopher's, Monsignor J. Norman Allen, who was the Vicar General, at the meeting of the clergy, he says, "We've got a new diocese, and now we have to pay for it." and it was culture shock because all of a sudden the goal went from $1,292,000 to somewhere north of $1,600,000, and that meant, and where that was the split has the same amount of cost over fewer parishes. So the parish goals were much, much larger. And of course, everyone was comparing them to the goals they had in San Francisco. Sure. And I kept saying, well, this is numerator and denominator. The numerator is a little bit bigger, but the denominator is a lot smaller, and that's how it comes out this way. And
did they get it?
Well, the mathematics lessons was not cheerfully received, because there it was.
Yeah, exactly.
So
did we make the first ADA?
We got close. There was also an interesting thing is now we had to get the mailing list. Mm-hmm. Well, getting a parish mailing list is like trying to extract needles from a porcupine. Mm-hmm. If you can get it out, do it, without getting many of them on yourself, you're all right. And so most of the parishes responded, very nicely, and we got it all in. But there was one parish that didn't come along. Uh-huh. And regrettably, it was the parish of my parish secretary, my secretary.
Well, that must have been awkward.
Well, she brought in the parish. The parish had a directory. Okay. Okay. She brought in the directory, and so we got the whole list after all. So that was a little fun. And then you have to remember in those days that the interest rates were crazy. I mean, you were talking about 15%.
I remember.
It was horrid. And so that was another economic constraint on what was going on. And I bring that up is because we had a couple of opportunities that it was like can't do it, just can't do it. There was a school in Milpitas, a high school called Samuel B. Eyre, up on Calaveras Road, mm-hmm. and it could have been had for $3 million.
And we didn't have it.
We just didn't have it. I mean, we were so strapped at making the commitments had. It was just not possible. And it's just one of those ones where wish we could have, but and because at that time that would have there was always a press because all the schools are on the west side. Mm-hmm. The high schools are on the west side, and it would have been, and plus it would have been a draw from across the border in Fremont,
Diocese of Oakland.
Yeah, so it would have been but there it was.
There it was.
You can't win them all. Happily, we were the the first finance council. We had a finance council before finance councils were
mandated.
Because in 1984 was when that happened. We had the two first stalwarts were a gentleman named Walter Schoendorf, who'd been a vice president for Safeway stores, and a gentleman named Sigmund Berezov, who was a former banker for Wells Fargo. And we put Sig on the ADA steering committee because he could when parishes would come in and complain that they were poor and they couldn't do this, he just think, well, Father, I know the bank right next door to you, and your people are a little more wealthy than you think.
Ouch.
Yeah, that was unfair. One of the great this is real inside clerical stuff. One of the great things was, how do you get these goals? How do you get a fair distribution of the goal? And that has been the quest for the Holy Grail.
It's probably still going on.
It still is. There have been iterations and iterations and iterations. We bought information from the Association of Bay Area Governments, all kinds of things to kind of rationalize what we're doing, but it never seemed to And then, of course, there was evaluation. The Council of Priests, then as now, has always said it may be too much, and so one of the first evaluations of the offices was run by Monsignor John Dwyer, and John had a rather simple methodology, which kind of confounded everybody, because I want it, I'll take it, I don't want it. So all the offices were measured on that. Now the difficulty is, different people had wants and needs, and so it all came out to a stalemate. Because, well, 2/3, it was almost unique. 2/3 of the vote were either I want it or I'll take it, and a third no. But it'd be a different third on every issue. So there was a policy setting time. It was people getting their legs under them.
I was just thinking, besides all of the finances, it was like setting up the council, setting up the priest council, setting up the offices, just a whole organization from the bottom up.
Yeah, it was
You gotta feel kind of proud about that.
Huh? Well, I was a very rude thing. I worked someplace in a school, and there was a real cynic on the faculty. He said, well, if you can't teach and maim them, try and do something permanent. So I don't think I maimed everybody. I think I did something permanent.
I think so too.
What would be the real difficulties? Well, there was a little blowback on it because it was, the rubric was, it's all too central, this great deal of centralization. Now, well, you have to, when you start thinking about that, you have a central purchaser for insurance for everybody, central purchaser for health for everybody. You have a deposit and loan fund, and so there's the color of
payroll.
Yeah, and the payroll, and so there's the color of it. A lot of, in fact, cash flow is going in and out. It goes to the chancery, but it goes out comes in the front door, goes out the back door. So people kept talking about centralization. I said, no. Your problem is, it's not centralization. What you have is immediacy. Because where before it was all, 50 miles away, now it's right here in the backyard. And that's what the issue is. So because there was a lot of, well, flexibility in Santa Clara County before the diocese started. And I mean, perhaps a little over flexibility
in some areas.
In some areas, and so policies starting getting, well, knock. This is the way we're supposed to be doing it. When I was about to leave the chancery in '85, the gentleman I was to replace had started without any permission to build an addition into his parish house so that he could have a place to retire. And then when it got stopped by accident because a disgruntled parishioner called in to tell us, he was a little miffed when we said, well, you know, if it's going to be retirement, we need to put in handicapped access and
rails.
Well, he was in his prime, and still at the prime time, and he was railing at this. Well, 4 years later, when he had a stroke, then we had to put them all in. Oh well, let's see, what other tales?
Yes,
tales out of school that we
great
could tell?
Stories. Absolutely. How were most of the priests, most of the clergy? I mean, were they excited that it was a new diocese? Was there, or was it?
Well, I think so. I think there were some of the middle-aged guys, you know, who were, I don't know, you know. But I think my take on it was the vast majority of the guys thought, you know, okay, here we go. You know, now I think that as the work got harder, that kind of
the glow kind of dimmed.
You know, but I mean, you know, when you get a new car, you know, it's an upper.
Yeah.
And then when you get the first dent, then
it's a downer.
Yeah. So no, I think I can only think of about two or three older priests who were, first of all, the bishop was too liberal for him. Okay. That's going to be a little problematic right off the bat. And then I think it was a matter of style too. You know, I think people sometimes have an image of what a bishop ought to be, and that's okay. Sometimes the personality doesn't fit the image that people have, and that kind of people find bothersome. I had to coach Bishop Demain a little bit. At the first gathering for the ADA, we gathered the chairs from all the parishes, and we were all at St. Joseph's in the chapel, and he basically said that it's it's a disagreeable task to ask for money, and he kind of went, you know, in that vein. So the professional fundraisers that we had at that time went out of their minds. So the next year when we're getting ready for it, I said, I got a hint for you, Coach. We aren't about bothered by asking for money because we're not asking for ourselves. We're asking for our ministries, you know. And so he got a little better at it, you know.
Yeah, it never was his favorite.
Not a stem winder, no. In fact, that's another thing we had to do. We had to, after the first couple of years of having just consultants in, you know, we got to do something about it, institutional development, you know, and that's when we started to have our own people processing the ADA, and then branching out to wills and other stuff.
Yeah. It's kind of the growing up.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that we did set up a personnel office almost immediately, so that we had to get help. And then, you know, we had and the place obviously had a San Francisco flavor. Okay, I mean the superintendent of schools was from San Francisco. The assistant was a former principal in San Francisco. The only two people that were really on site from Santa Clara County were Sister Marcella Fabing who was religious ed, and Joe Bauer, who was running the youth at the time. And so so there was and then the tribunal was from San Francisco as well, Maurice Shea, and Sister Jude, and so there was the San Francisco flavor kind of didn't have as much value. And the other thing that went on there was that Bishop made sure that his chancellor was a pastor, a previous pastor in Santa Clara County, and he was Monsignor Joe Milani. He was not a Monsignor then, but he was, and Joe was kind of reluctantly pulled out of St. Catherine's to be the.
And we're going to have the opportunity to hear Joe's story too.
Yeah. And then it was felt that the Vicar General shouldn't be in the office. Oh. And that he would be the ombudsman for the clergy, that he'd come in and say, by the way, we need to address this, or you need to soften on this, and it worked the other way too. Could you go out and whisper in somebody's ear that he's acting out and we need to get it fixed. So that was another kind of credibility appointment. Mm-hmm. Okay, and Monsignor Milani called the very gentleman that I had seen out in Stockton, Monsignor Kane, they were classmates, and he said, "What do you think?" And McCain says, "By God, take it." So, good. You'll get the story from there.
Yes, I'm sure we'll get the story, but I don't think anybody really realized how involved it was when we broke off and became our own diocese. Just all of the kinds of things you've been talking about.
Well, to do it seamlessly, because most of the stuff I've just talked about, the ordinary parishioner
didn't have
the only thing they get is that ADA envelope.
Yeah. Oh, I was one of those ordinary parishioners. Yeah.
And so, but it did affect the lay employees a great deal, because they now all of a sudden they're in a different health plan, and the pension plan, and so there's much more stability then. And one of the things we did do is that the archdiocese of San Francisco had 6 schools supported or sponsored by the archdiocese, and they were Marin Catholic, at the time Sacred Heart Boys Schools, Cathedral Girls School. See if I can remember them all.
Sarah,
and Mitty, and Reardon. So and they all those schools were represented by a union, and so and that relationship had been very testy. Started back in 1972, when it was really unseemly struggle, probably poorly thought out by management, and about equally because it takes 2 to make a fight,
right?
So so the split comes, and one of the things we decided, we just acknowledge that the union's there, recognize it, and we move on. We're not decertifying or anything of that sort. So that one went very nicely.
Good.
Okay. See whatever else.
Where did you live when you were working in the chancery?
I lived at St. Mary's in Los Gatos.
St. Mary's, okay.
Residence there, yeah. I had been living at Cerro High School. The reason for that was so I'd be closer to my mom and dad. My mother was always very frail, and then just after, I think my dad died 3 years after the diocese got started. Okay. So I had to be close to help take care of him. So I'm thinking, St. Mary's in Los Gatos, and then then interim, I was at St. William's for a bit before going to St. Lawrence as pastor. Mm-hmm. Okay. Thinking about the beginning, I think that's about.
That's a lot.
That's I think I covered it. Yeah. Covered the range. I'm sure that there are things I've omitted. You know, I mean.
But there'll probably be others that will pick it up.
Yeah.
Your fellow founders.
Yeah. I mean, get them now because it's going away. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for this.
You're welcome.
This was quite wonderful.
Well, I hope it's. Well, we need to have a disclaimer. He's 78. He doesn't remember it all like he used to.
On that note, thank you.